We're delighted to welcome you to our conversation entitled From Generation to Generation. We're thrilled to host Miraku Kamei and his son Hisaaki from Japan, along with special guest Benoît Rolland, master bow maker and dear friend in Watertown, Massachusetts, and hopefully, but not definitely, maybe Andrew Maskey from the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. The announcement for this evening included the biographies, so I'm not going to go back over them at this time. Simply to say it's evening here in Boston and it's good morning in Japan. Happily, our leading participants have special connections to one another, connections that allow us to explore additional ideas and questions about the following: art, tradition, creativity, continuity, and innovation. In 2010, we took a trip through the gallery to Japan, and our art resource was Professor Maskey. He had spent 7 years living in Japan and devoted 12 years of his research to his PhD thesis entitled Potters and Patrons in Edo, Japan, Takatori Ware and the Kuroda Domain. So he has worked and had worked closely with the Kamei family. On our trip, Andrew suggested that we go to Fukuoka and that we visit the Kamei site. We did, and we had the opportunity to meet the 14th generation master, and it was extraordinary and very moving for us. In fact, the day before we visited, we had rushed into an antique store in Hita, Japan, and I had purchased a very small flower holder which goes on the wall called a hanaire. When I brought it back to the van, Andrew opened it and said, "Oh, you've just bought something from the 13th generation." So in many ways, it was meant to be that we would come together and work together with the family. It took us about 4 years to organize the shipping of their first exhibition outside of Japan. And from then on, every 2 years, we've done an exhibition, first of the 15th generation, and subsequently of his work and his son's work. And it's been a remarkably meaningful and important relationship. In addition, we've been very fortunate to be able to place their artwork in major museums across the world. And so their work is now presently in the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and many other museums. It has become an opportunity for people around the world to be able to hold, if you will, visually, the extraordinary works of their entire family. Miraku, his wife Maki, and their son Hisaaki visited Boston some 2 years ago. And with the help of Mugi Hanao, our dear friend and superb and experienced translator, they all visited the studio of master bow maker and MacArthur winner Benoît Rolland. What was intended to be a 1-hour visit turned into a 4-hour exchange of admiration, which now has become a friendship. And with that in mind, I asked Benoît to join us this evening as well. That day, the artists began to explore issues and ideas that we hope to share this evening. This will be an opportunity to benefit from their experience and their perspectives pertaining to art and its creation. Hopefully, we will also have time to touch on topics of time and silence, themselves necessary aspects of the creative life. We will also talk a bit about their feelings about their creations, which are often described as craft and not as art. And this brings to mind the words of Brother Thomas. As he worked in clay during a time in this country and in the world, especially in this country though, where clay works were classified as craft. Thomas wrote, skill and art are not the same thing. The only real measurement of art is astonishment. This resonates for me with the concept of radical amazement or astonishment shared by the theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel. So we've got lots to cover this evening. Clearly, both Kamei and Benoît come from very specific traditions. Benoît from the rigorous tradition of modern bow making, started by in the 19th century. Miraku Kamei and is the 15th generation of the Takatori ceramic tradition, which began in 16. Is there a way to cut? That's better. Thank you. So I again turn to Brother Thomas. He wrote, when we abandon tradition and culture, there are no honest roots for creativity. Both artists that we will be talking to tonight certainly honor the traditions from which they come, and at the same time struggle with the ability to refresh it and to honor it. I made a note earlier that each of them carries very heavy traditions, and they keep trying to adjust it. And I think that no 3D printer could make a bow of Benoît's, nor a chawan, a tea bowl of Miraku Kamei. I'm going to be posing a number of questions to the artists, and they will be answering through Mugi's translations as we begin to explore ideas and experiences. We'll also be interspersing our discussions with a special documentary that the Kamei Kiln has created. The subtitles have been provided by Mugi and they're terrific. The full documentary will be attached to the YouTube version of this event. And there will also be a documentary, a brief one on Benoît called Take a Bow or Take a Bow, spelled the same way. And we hope that you will enjoy both of them. In addition, we have posted or will be posting 4 questions, and the person who gets all 4 of them right will have their names introduced into a drawing. At the close of our conversation, Rose will draw the winner's name, and that person will receive 2 yunomis as shown on your screen, I hope. Finally, please use the chat function or the question and answer function to ask questions as we begin our program this evening. We're grateful that so many of you have joined us and hope that you will find this both interesting, stimulating, and inviting. So I want to actually begin with, I think, for me, the most demanding of the questions, which is that both of you, Benoît and Miraku, come out of very specific traditions. Benoît's case, a very, very demanding tradition of bow making in France, and then having come here. And so there's this opportunity to have the moment to explore what that really means in terms of the weight of that tradition. And Miraku Kamei, the 15th generation, has only 410 years of tradition that he has to deal with. So Mugi, can you help us?
Yes. ですね、今質問をこれから差し上げようと思うんですけれども、まずベノアさんに対しては、そのフランスで19世紀から使われているその伝統というものが非常に重い伝統というしっかりした伝統というものが、の背景にしてベノアさんはやっていらっしゃるわけですけれども、フランスからアメリカにいらしてその伝統をどのように考えていらっしゃるのか。そしてミラクさんに対してはですね、その15代410年も続いているその 伝統というものをこれからどのように、今までもそうですけれども、どのようにお考えになっているのか、これからどのようになさりたいと思っていらっしゃるのかということについてお伺いしたいと思います。
Benoît, since she's translated for them, why don't you answer a little bit of the question first, then they can think about what they would like to say.
でベノアさんからお答えいただきます。
About the tradition and innovation.
Yes.
Tradition was once an innovation, and it stays alive only if the tradition stays alive only if the innovation brings something new and informs the tradition to keep its interest alive.
まず、伝統に関して言わせていただくと、その伝統と、それから革新ということは、これ非常につながっておりまして、その伝統が生きていくためには、革新がその伝統を新しくするような形で生き続けていかなければいけない。革新がないことには、その伝統は生き続けることができないというのをまず、それが私の考えです。
When I was a student in 1975, I completed my apprenticeship with a master in the French tradition of bow making. But I was troubled and profoundly disappointed by the fact that even though I have learned how to properly make a bow, whatever the attention I put in my work, I felt that I was at a long distance to understand how the best bow of the 19th century had been made.
1975年に生徒であり、先生について弟子の時代を終えたわけですけれども、その時やはり失望感が多かったというのは、今までこれから一体今までの伝統をですね、どのようにして生かせばいいのか、この伝統の重みがあまりにも強すぎてですね、このすべての技術を学ぶことが一体できたんだろうかと、これからできるんだろうかということで、自分に対してかなり失望を覚えたということを覚えております。
And if I wanted to honor with my work the respected French tradition, I did have to figure out how to reach out to the past to understand what had been said and not written down, and figure out also what had been understood and forgotten afterwards.
それをですね、自分の伝統というものをまず尊重するには何をしなければいけないかと思ったときに、ずっと伝えられてきたこと、それ書かれてきたことではなく、口頭で伝えられてきたこと、それから理解されてきたこと、それ何が忘れ去られて、何が置き去られて、何が取り上げられて理解されてきたかということをすべてわからないと、伝統を尊重するということができないのではないかと思ったわけです。
Just one last thing. The French tradition of bow making is very young compared to ceramic art in Japan.
Right, that's for sure. And it's a good.
一つ最後ですけれども、弓の作る伝統というのは、日本の陶芸なんかに比べるとかなり若い、かなり最近のことであるということを一つ申し上げておきます。
So it's a perfect segue to ask Miraku and Hisaaki, if you would like, to reflect on the notion of the importance both of tradition and innovation.
でそこで、ミラクさんに同じ質問ですけれども、伝統と革新ということに関してはどのようにお考えでしょうか。
まず伝統というものに関しましては、今本当ベロナさんがおっしゃられた通りで、基本的にもう400年ぐらい続いてきてるんですけども、いわゆるその400年続いてきたことを 守っていくだけっていうのは、これは伝統ではないんですよね。あくまでもうそれは伝統の継承ではなくて、伝統の保存。そこにやっぱり伝統を引き継ぐっていうことは、そういう先人たちがやってきたものの全てやっぱり網羅しながら、やっぱりその私なら15代の色を出していくっていうことが必要になってきます。これが伝統。
Okay. As Mr. Benoît said, of course, we have over 400 years of tradition, but keeping the tradition is not really a tradition. It is just to inherit tradition, but to save tradition, to keep tradition. But what we have to do is we inherit it. And what it means is that we have to understand everything what's been going on. But on top of it, for my case, I have to put my own color as the 15th of Kamei family.
で、そこから結局今度は革新ということに入っていくんですけども、私の前にはもう14人というひいじいさん含めて素晴らしい投稿がもう14人もいるわけですよね。その中でやっぱり特に高取焼きの場合はアーティストではなくっていわゆるその時代に生きてきたお茶の指導者、ティーセレモニーの指導者っていうのがいまして、一番最初であれば千利休から始まって、それから古田織部、そして小堀遠州、そして今度は福岡藩のボスである黒田っていうふうにその焼き物に対してのその助言者っていうのかな、アドバイザーっていうものがコロコロ変わるわけですよね。その中でやっぱりそれが一つの時代背景となり、作品に、彼らの好みっていうのが反映されている。そこまでまず。
はい。So when we talk about now based on the tradition, we will talk about the innovation. For if you think about my own position, I have 14 potters behind me, including my own ancestors. And in case of Takatori, we have, before we call artists, we have craftsmen, and we have also the tea ceremony masters among those people. So for example, it started as Sen no Rikyu, who is the master of tea ceremony, and then moved to Oribe, then moved to Enshu, and then we have a feudal lord, Kuroda family, Kuroda clan. And then these people, 4 people, had different play a role of advisor to the potters and to the pottery that they liked. So we have to understand those backgrounds as each era had in its own characteristic, and plus these tradition has to be reflected on the pieces that I'm making or.
Mugi, you're cutting in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
If you can, Mugi, I don't know if she can hear me. Mugi, you were cutting in and out, we're losing your voice. But essentially you're saying that they carry with them the responsibility of 14 previous masters. And as a result of that, it is extraordinarily important for them to respect that. It is a wrong word burden, but it is nonetheless a responsibility that they have to the past. And at the same time, they have to create for themselves and their own spirit.
伝統を尊重するということは非常にそれはもしかして負担になる可能性もあるんですけれども、これはやはり責任として、でその責任を担うことに加えて自分の色を出していくということが非常に難しいことではないかと思います。
I hope that that makes some kind of sense in terms of what I'd like to ask Rose to do now is to play the very beginning of the documentary to give everyone a chance to have a better sense of what's involved in the creation of their work.
今ちょっとビデオ一部を放映しまして、そのどのような形でその伝統が引き継がれているかということを皆さんがお分かりいただけるように。
我がミラク窯のシンボル的な存在であります上り窯です。基礎はですね、大体1700年代のものでございまして、ここが西皿山っていう土地なんですけども、数多くの窯があったんですが、こちらを共同窯として使ってたということで、上り窯の数は全部で7部屋ございまして、非常に大きな上り窯でございます。しかしながら今現在福岡市の条例によりまして、そういうふうに煙を上げちゃいけないということで、今はもう使用することなく本当に皆様に、昔はこういう窯を使ってたんだよっていうことで楽しんでいただいております。この窯はですね、こういう耐火のレンガを、入り口にずっと積みまして入り口を塞ぎまして、これは全部です。道着の間、それから一の間二の間全て塞ぎまして、で道着の間から炊き始めますけども、二の間に移った時に、このくらいの分だけ開けまして、そこから、うちの場合はですね、非常に細身の木、これも、ヒノキとか杉とかそういう割と細身の薪をここからこう投げ込んで、それも手前真ん中奥と場所をこうねちゃんと考えながら投げ込んでいきます。やっぱり細い木を使うっていうのが機敏なそういう温度調整ができるということなんですね。太い木をねボーンと投げ込みますと、やっぱりそういう機敏な温度調節ができないということで、うちの場合はそういう小割りの木を主に用いてました。で高取焼きの特徴っていうのが、こういうふうに釉薬がかかってますんで、こういうお茶碗も直接入れるのではなく、あえて薪の灰がかからないように、お茶碗になればこういうふうなお茶碗株、鞘の一種ですね、こういうケースに、こういうお茶碗を一個一個収めて、そして板で塞いでこういうのを積み上げて、釜詰めをして焼いてたということでございます。でここに穴が開いておりますけども、基本的に火が通るようにですね、こういう穴がこの鞘にはお茶碗株には開いております。だから直接灰がかからないようなそういう工夫っていうものもですね、先人たちは考えながらいろいろ試行錯誤しながらやったようでございます。ミラク窯では、藩陽時代、藩が採取してたという土山があるんですけども、その土山を12代、私のひいひいじいさんが手に入れることができまして、今現在もそこから原土を取ってまいりまして、その原土をこういう形で追肥をして使用しております。まずはこの原土をですね、水を加えてここである程度攪拌しまして、これを、この機械の攪拌水槽に入れます。でここで攪拌された、水に溶けた土がこの第一層に流れ込み、ここで比重のわりかし重いやつが下に沈みます。砂とか石とかですね。でさらにこの第2層第3層で比重のまたより重いものが沈んで、最終的な大元のためには本当に水に溶けた土だけが、蓄積されていくという形になります。で最終的にその水に溶けた土、それをフィルタープレスという機械で、 吸い上げて、絞って我々が日頃使う粘土に生成するという形をとっております。
So let me continue a bit. Clearly, Benoît, you don't have such an elaborate preparation to create your bows, but the preparation of the materials and the selection of materials in both instances are extraordinarily important. So could you just speak a little bit about that aspect of your process?
ベノアさんの質問なんですけども、もちろん陶芸とは違ったもちろん準備、あるいは材料の選択ということがあるかと思いますが、それについて少しお話しいただけますか。
When I make a bow, I always have music in mind. Music is the main ingredient of how to make a bow. So, but what is fascinating is to make such a precise tool out of a raw material. And this raw material is the wood coming from Brazil. And the different steps consist in choosing the right wood, having in mind the fiber organization, the style of the musician, how he or she plays, the musicality, and everything is processed at the same time for reaching the ultimate goal is to make music.
私が作る材料を選択する場合、弓を作る場合なんですけど、まず音楽をいつも頭の中に置いております。音楽がその重要な内容物ということになるんですけれども、その原材料、これは大体ブラジルからの木材というのが多いんですが、それから非常に精巧な道具を作るためには、まず、音楽家、その材料ももちろんなんですけれども、その音楽家がどういう、そのために作っている音楽家がどのような人なのか、どのようなスタイルで演奏するのか、その人の音楽性、あるいはその人が好む音楽、そういうことをですね、いつも頭に置いて、そして最終的には非常に精度の高い弓を作るというのが私の大体の過程というふうになっています。
So let me then interject a question, because Benoît, what you said certainly raises an important issue for both of you, I think. You're listening to music in your head and keeping in mind the musician for whom you're creating the bow. Mm-hmm. In the case of Miraku, he's creating utensils for the tea ceremony and for individuals who will preserve and value the beauty of what he has created specifically for their use.
これ先ほどの答えをお聞きしますと、お二人の違うもちろん材料ですけれども、それに共通点が見えてくる。まずベノアさんの場合ですと、必ず音楽、あるいは作っている音楽家のことがいつも頭に残っている。それを頭に持ちながら作っている。でミラクさんの場合は、これはお茶道具ということで、作るものはお茶に使われるという価値をいつも頭に置いて、お茶に使われる道具ということを頭に置いてお作りになっているという2つの共通点が見えてきます。
So this brings me to a question that I hope will be meaningful to both of you, which is, how does spirituality and humanity inform your work?
ここで質問なんですけれども、お二人に、この精神性と人間性というこの2つの大きな要素がどのように作品に投影されているのでしょうかというのが次の質問です。
So Miraku, do you want to try to respond to that? I apologize for the abstract quality of the question, but I really believe that your work and Benoît's work approaches both the spiritual and the human in the humane sense of the word human in a very special way.
ちょっと質問がかなり抽象的になってしまって申し訳ないんですけれども、やはりベノワさんと亀井さんのことをお二人のことを考えるとですね、この精神性と人間性というこの非常に抽象的なこの2つの課題がやはりお二人の作品に現れているような気がするので、そこのところをお聞かせ願えればと思います。
Yeah, please.
どうぞ。
まあ、精神性、まあ、いつも思ってますのが、やっぱり先ほども言いましたけども、私の前には14人という投稿がおります。まあ、その中で、まあ、さっきのね、オリベとか演習とか言いましたけども、彼らがその時代のやっぱり革新的な作品を生み出す一つのやっぱり要素になってきてるんですよね。今そういう指導者がいなくて、やっぱり
We lost the sound for a minute.
Yeah.
ものを生み出す、先ほど長さんがおっしゃいましたように、彼の場合は多分オークチュールに近い、もうそういう。
So it is many miles from here, Mugi.
Sorry. I just lost the, すいません、ちょっと、あれ
You go ahead, Mugi, and try to translate what he was saying, and then hopefully I'll be able to get back on.
All right, up to here, as I said before, there are 14 portals behind me, and the Oribe and Enshu are there, but they themselves, at their time, they were innovative creators at their time, and then we have the example of those innovation before that, before myself. I guess we lost them.
She's going to try to reconnect with them. So Benoît, can you speak a little bit to the issue of the opportunity to infuse both spirituality and humanity? I think you alluded to it already by saying that when you make a bow, you actually have the music in your heart, spirit, and mind, and at the same time, you have the individual for whom you're making the bow as part of your process.
Yes, yes, absolutely. My goal is to celebrate the beautiful, you know, to help a musician produce his music is something really important in my life. To celebrate the human being, many believers would say that serving the beautiful comes from God. I'm not a believer, but I'm really convinced that the beautiful comes from the human being, and we are on that earth to make beautiful things. You know, we are not designed to destroy or to make wars or to, no, the absolute opposite. And my goal is to serve as far as I can the beautiful.
Mugi,
OK。大丈夫です。聞こえますでしょうか。まず私はもちろんいつも音楽を頭に置き、その作っている、お客であるその音楽家のことを頭に置いていますけれども、私の、究極の目標というのはですね、その美というものを称賛する。そして音楽家が音楽を作る。これはその美に関係するんですけども、音楽家が音楽を作る手助けをするというのが私の、究極の目的です。で、これは私にとってはその人間を称賛する。私はもちろんその神のことを信じているわけではないのですけれども、美というものは必ず存在し、その美というものはこれ人間から起こってくるものであり、それを、称えることをしたいと。そしてもちろんこの地球、人間性というものはこの地球、美しい地球を壊す、あるいはその戦争を起こすというようなことではなく、一番大切なことはその美を作り出すということである。で、私はそのために自分の人生を捧げたいというふうに思っております。
Perfect. So I'd like to hear their thoughts about that. About particularly, I loved your phrase, Benoît, the notion of celebrating the beautiful. Because ultimately, whether it is with or without some divine intervention, it certainly is the opportunity for the best in us as human beings to be presented. And I hope that the same thing is true, and I feel that very much so about Kamei's work, that what they have created is extraordinary beauty, not only visual surface beauty, but an inner beauty that carries with it all of humankind's respect for and belief in the importance of nature. And the tea ceremony itself is the attentiveness to the details of nature.
先ほど、ベノアさんのおっしゃったことに関してですが、その美を追求する、美を称賛するということは非常にこれは亀井家とも関わることではないかと思うのですが、亀井さんがお作りになっている作品というのは、その素晴らしい美、外面の美だけではなく、その内面、つまりその人間性をすべて含んだ内面の美しさ、そしてそれはその自然を含む美しさを亀井家では作り上げられており、そして、お茶の、ティーセレモニー、茶の湯に関してみても、非常なその自然の、詳細な自然を取り込んだ非常に美しいものを常に作り上げているセレモニーであるということで、そこは共通点ではないかと思います。
So what I'd like to ask is for Rose to put up maybe 2 or 3 of their pieces just for a 30-second glance so that you have the opportunity with it on your screen to really engage with this absolutely beautiful ceramic and the lacquer lid made by another master. And this is the cold water container, the misosashi, that is used as part of the tea ceremony, done by the 15th generation.
これ今この、落下の蓋付きの水差しの説明ですけれども、これは15代の非常に美しい、作品で、これを皆様にちょっと見ていただいて、私たちがどのようなことについて話しているのかを目で見ていただきたいということで、今3つほど作品をしているところです。
So clearly this is a chawan, a tea bowl. Mugi, is this the 8th glaze? My understanding is that there were 7 glazes that are primarily shared intergenerationally, not by formula. And this was a glaze that the 15th generation artist has added.
これは、的な、釉薬ではなく、これは15代が、開発なされたというか、釉薬ということでよろしいんでしょうか。
は、13代、私のひいじいさんの時代に、実はとあるお寺のご住職が、お寺に伝わってきたその高取焼きの名品だということで、実はこういうもののお茶碗をお持ちになられたんですよ、うちにね。で、その時が結局私の13代、ひいじいさんの時代で、実を言うと、それよりももっと前に黒田藩がたまたまできた、偶然でできた名品ということで、30碗ぐらいですかね、30個ぐらい、そこのお寺に、寄付されたらしいんですよ。それがやっぱり時代の流れとともに、割れたりとか破損したりとかして3つしか残ってなかったんです。そこまでちょっと通訳を。
This actually is the happened to be that one of the temples monk brought this one to us to the actually the 13th that that's my great grandfather. And the monk said that the Kuroda clan family, feudal lord, had 30 pieces of like this. It happened to be created accidentally in the kiln, but it was so beautiful. So they, the feudal lord, donated 30 pieces of this type to this temple. But of course, as a long time passed, and then some of them are broken, some of them are damaged. So there are only 3 left. So this monk brought them to my great grandfather. And so this is the tradition from the part of the Kuroda clan's pieces.
And that's how it got preserved. And now he makes tea-bowls and some other utensils for the tea ceremony using this crystalline glaze.
これはその後、15代が開発なされて、再現なされたということでしょうか。
だから13代の時代ではね、これ陶芸用語で窯変というんですけど、
はい、
窯変、
はい、
もう窯の中で偶然できるものなんです、
はいはいはい、
ですからこのようなお茶碗もその13代の時代ではやっぱりこうちゃんと計算して再現っていうのが難しかった。それを私の父が引き継いで、父もいろいろその研究して、で私も釉薬についてユニバーシティで、勉強してきましたんで、いろいろ父と一緒にやりながら私の時代だから3代かけて完成したという高取のいわゆる復元品ですね、昔の。
This one actually, before that was made as the transformation in the kiln. So there was an accident that came out with beautiful patterns. So the 13th, my great grandfather was trying to recreate this pieces, but it was a little bit difficult to calculate and recreate. So my father inherited this issue from my great grandfather, and myself also studied about glaze at the university with my father. We're trying to recreate this glaze and the transformation in the kiln. And finally, this is what we came up, and with my father's help, came up with after the 3 generations.
I would like to have a question for Miraku. I was amazed to see how thin his masterpieces are, beside the absolute beauty of them. And my question is the thickness important in the way he masters his art, and does he look for over the time to reduce the thickness as far as he can?
That's a good question, I think, because the question years ago was asked of him, and they said, why do you throw your bowls so thinly? And he said, because he was saving the clay for his children and grandchildren.
Is that right? Oh, okay.
And now he has a grandchild. So incidentally, on Friday night, I had an opportunity to see him, Hisaaki, and their son. So they're now in the works, a 16th and 17th generation. Let him answer. Meanwhile, Rose, do you want to put up the questions that people need to answer, or have they already seen them? And let them submit their answers to you. I'd love to hear his answer to Benoit's question. And then I want both of you to think about the question of sharing what you know and creating a transition of your knowledge, not your heart and soul, but the techniques themselves, so that the next generation and next generation will be able to at least create bows or bowls that resonate with the world around them. So meanwhile, those of you that are participating, please
send your answers into the chat box to panelists or just to myself. My name is Rose. And for every person who gets the answer right, I will take your name down. And each time you get an answer right, I will put it in a little hat. And then at the end, I will sort of draw the name out for the person who has the most correct answers.
So my question is, Rose, can you do two things at once?
I will try my best.
All right, so you do the questions, and meanwhile, Mugi, if they can begin to try to answer, it would be great.
Okay. ベノワさんからの質問なんですけれども、このその外見の美しさプラス、ベノワさんが非常に驚かれたのはこの薄さであると。で、この薄さというのは非常にやはり重要なものなのか、そしてそのテクニックをこれずっと代々だんだん薄くなってきたのか、この年代が経つに従ってだんだん薄さを増していったのかということをまずお聞きしたい。そしてそれに対してパッカーさんの方ですけれども、前にご損保にお聞きしたときに、粘土を節約しなきゃいけないから薄くしているんだと、孫にももう残さなければいけないからというふうなお答えをなさったそうなんですけれども、金曜日に17代目にもお目にかかったので、これで薄くしなければならないのかという、冗談ですけれども、要するにそういうベノワさんからのまず質問にちょっとお答えいただければと思うんですが。
これもいわゆる時代背景なんですけども、昔はこういうお茶入れですね、お茶入れっていうお茶のパウダーを入れるこういうねお茶入れ、はい、これが結局もう日本国のと交換できるぐらいの価値があったものなんです。それでよりやっぱり薄い方が薄ければ薄いほど良いということで、各日本のやっぱりそういう大名藩がですね、そういう薄作りに取り組ませたっていうことは確かでございます。で、うちの場合はこういうふうな 1.5 ミリという厚みで制作するんですけども、これ断面ですけどね、薄ければ薄いほどいいっていう時代っていうのはもう過ぎ去りました。過ぎ去りました。もう江戸時代までですね。しかしうちの窯はそれを受け継ぎながら、やっぱり最低やっぱりこういう 1.5 ミリの厚みで仕上げるっていうことは基本的に高取りの技術ということで、これは後世に伝えていっております。だから、
はいはい、どうぞどうぞ。どうぞ。はい、
ですからこのお茶入れに関してはやっぱりこの薄作りの技術っていうのはやっぱり一番大事なところですね。一番大事なところです。でも生活スタイルに合わせてお茶碗とかはやっぱりさっきのオートクチュールじゃないですけども、あんまり薄いと思った時に熱いですよね。ですからもうちょっと熱くないように、肉厚に作ってくれとかいうそういうご注文にはお答えしております。
わかりました。Regarding the thickness, which is like actually the thinness, that was a tradition in the back then. The thinner, the better. That's what for the at least for the chaire, which is the tea powder container. The thinner, the better. That is the norm back then. But it was not so now. At that point, back then, the feudal lord, all of them think that the thinner the thickness is, the better. So that a lot of potters try to make it as thin as possible. And in Takatori, it's 1.5 millimeter, which is as he show you the thickness. It's very thin. And but the thinner the better notion is actually up to Edo period, and in the 19th century it was not the common notion anymore. But this is Takatori's technique that every potter of Takatori family inherited, and it's very important as a technique for Kamei family to receive and cherish. For the tea container, the Kamei family keeps this thinness. However, for the bowl, if it's sort of like an order-made, like an autocture kind of, if our clients want it a little thicker, because if you pour hot tea into it, it's a little bit hard to hold because it's so thin. If the clients want it to be a little thicker, then we will try to accommodate that. But this is Takatori's one of the characteristics and one of the techniques that we inherited, so we will keep that.
Fabulous. That's very helpful. Rose, if we can go back to some of the images, I have a question for both. And then I think near the end, we'll play either the second or the third clip, whichever you prefer. The question, and Mugi, that's a perfect way for us to get to it, is to think about both the tradition and the transmission of the tradition. Mm-hmm. And so I think at this point, Benoît, it's more complicated for you. You don't have an immediate descendant in your household. And so how do you think about the tradition, all the knowledge that you inherited, you have now added to that tradition? How does that get preserved? And how does it get transmitted in a way that would equal the standard that you've now set for the creation of bows?
これはベノワさんと、亀井さんお二人に今質問なんですけれども、ここで伝統とそれの継承、それを伝える、どうやって伝えるかという、そちらの方に移っていきたいと思います。で、まずベノワさんからお答えいただきたいんですけれども、今、ベノワさんの場合、その後継者という方が身近にお家にいられるわけではないので、この今までベノワさんが学んできたこと、それをどのようにして保存して、どのようにして時代に伝えるか。そしてそのご自分が設定された、確立されたその基準というものをどのようにして伝えていくかというのが、質問で、これを同じように亀井様にも同じ質問をお答えいただきたいと思います。
And Benoît, trust me, she said exactly what I did.
I trust you.
Thank you.
Well, it's a very interesting question, and there are a few faults as answers, but in my view, what I want first is to recenter the profession and to re-put music into the tradition of bow making, because, as I said earlier, the music and instrument making, and especially bow making, had been disconnected at the end of the 19th century, because probably because of the Industrial Revolution. And then the bows had been made according to a specific technique, but very far from the music practice. So my goal is to reinsert music into that profession, and then to use the new possibilities that the modern technologies offer in many aspects of it, and of course to transmit my art with including the music in the gesture of making the bows.
これは非常に興味深い質問なんですけれども、私の一番大切に思っていることはもう音楽ということなので、この伝統的な弓の作りを考えてみますと、この弓の作りというものは一時期19世紀に なんというか音楽から離れてしまった時期があって、その音楽を作り出すというよりも、その非常に特定のその技術を持って、作ったのです。弓が作られるようになったのですけれども、それがその音楽を作り出すという観点からいくと、あまりその音楽に沿ったものではなく、それからなんかかなり離れてしまった時期があったので、私のまず一番の、目的というのは、その音楽をこの弓作りにもう完全に合体させるということがまず一つと、それから現在のいろんな技術というものがありまして、材料とかも含めて技術がありますので、それを私のその芸術、私の作品として音楽を含めた一つの作品として弓をこれから作っていきたいというふうに思っています。
Mugi, before they answer, I hope that they can see this image on the screen. It took my breath away when we unpacked it.
亀井さんにお答えいただきたいんですけど、その前に一つ、この作品を私が見たときに、箱から開けてみたときにもう本当に驚いたというふうに、そこをお伝えしたいと思います。
That was really not related to the transfer of tradition, but one of the comments that I have received from curators at museums about this exhibition and the collection that both of them sent is that somehow the work itself, just in these 8 or 10 years we've worked together, continues to evolve and grow in a very un-Japanese-like manner, meaning that there is experimentation, there is innovation, and yet great respect for tradition. So I think we can use this as a way for him to talk about the transition or transfer of his traditions, but also it seems to me that he has added, and this is the second piece, that is at exactly that level of innovation, of absolutely beautiful. If we're talking about beauty and music and art, this piece captures it all. But he's now transferring this, or will transfer this over the next decades to his son. How does he think about that?
お答えいただく前に私の感想と他のことなんですけれども、博物館、美術館の学芸員の方からもいろいろコメントをいただいたんですけども、この2つの作品ですね、これが私とギャラリーと亀池との、付き合いというのは10年ほどになりますけれども、その間のその進化というのでしょうか、成長というのですか、変化というのでしょうか、それが非常に印象的で、それも非常に日本的というよりも、ちょっと日本の典型から離れたようなやり方で変化をしていっているというように私は思います。それでここに何が入ってくるかというと、ここはイノベーションということ、革新ということがここに入ってくるんですけれども、この伝統を踏まえながらも非常に革新的な作品を生み出されている。ものすごくそれがとても素晴らしい美につながっているということで、これを今度は久明様の方に伝えていかなければいけないということなんですけれども、それはどのようにお考えでしょうか。
手取り足取り指導するものではなくって、今一緒にね、同居って一緒に住んでるわけですけども、やっぱりそういう日頃の生活の中から、うちの久明であれば、私が15代とはどういう人間なのかとかね、その辺がもうやっぱり日頃生活してる中で分かるわけですよね。そういう中で、やっぱり14代、父はもう亡くなりましたので、ちょっと分かんないですけども、その前の13代なんかいうの私も知りませんけど、そうやってやっぱり東大に触れながら、やっぱり私の中からまた先代を感じ取ってもらうとか、そういうことをやっぱり自分の中でやっぱり DNA で持ってると思うんですよね。それをやっぱり大事にしながら、あとはやっぱり先ほども申しましたけども、この時代の流れの中で、今度は 16代が自分の作品をどうこうはめ込んでいって、時代にマッチさせるのか、それは彼が考えることですので、とにかく私が彼に教えれるっていうのは、まあ、私の時代まで私がやってきたこと、ね400年前からの作品も見せながら、まあ、私は恩子自身、古きを訪ね新しきを知ることを大事にしろといつも言ってるんですけども、これを彼にはずっとやらせながら、もうやっぱり口伝でね、こうしたのを合わせるっていうのは控えてます。もう自分で私自身を見て学びながらということで、それが次の代に引き継ぐ一番の大事な要素ではないかと思います。
What I think of the tradition and the transition is this, that it's not that I'm going to teach my son the technique and everything, every details, but since because of the corona too, and we live together now, and we sort of share our daily life together. So by doing it, I would like him to understand who the 15th, which is myself, who the 15th is. I would like him to understand it. I would like him to seek who I am and try to understand it. Well, for example, I did know my father, the 13th, but I don't really know my grandfather, the 14th. But I could feel my grandfather 13th through my father the 14th. So I would like my son to feel our ancestors through me. So it's like a DNA, but I would like to cherish that our continuation within ourselves. And on top of it, I would like him to understand, and I'd like him to find out how himself is going to be reflected on the pieces, because his era will be different from mine. And he has to understand what this era is, where he is now. And also, the other thing that I'd like him to understand is I always tell him that learning from past and refreshing our knowledge, that's the most important thing. So this is what I've been teaching him, and I'd like him to understand and sort of gain what I learned from my father and my ancestors, and I'd like him to do that, the same things through me. That's the most important thing.
So
well, this is remarkable, you know, to understand that the generations are interconnected between each other. It's absolutely fascinating.
And it's wonderful. There are three things I need to do. One is to thank everyone. Two is to give an apology that we ran over time, and we will continue to for a little bit more. In that there's one more clip that Rose will play as we sort of end. And three is that Rose needs to at least announce the winner. And then I want to go back once more and just thank everyone. Rose, you're on.
All right, so I have collected all of the names in this beautiful bowl that I'm lucky enough to be in person with. I would like to say kudos to Andrew Belfield, Guile Rhodes, Summer Roble, and Laurel Potter for being entered all 4 times and for getting your answers in really quickly. I shall now do a drawing. Name. Drum roll at home.
It'll be a little bit bad if you read your own name.
Yeah, and the winner is Summer Roble. So congratulations, Summer, we will be in touch. And now that we have an answer to that question, I will play the next video.
I just wanted, as you're about to start it, Rose, to thank everyone, say a couple of things. One, that this will be available as a YouTube video. Two, that the full documentary from the Kameis will be available as well as part of that. And then a very short but lovely video on Benoît called Take a Bow will also be attached to that. So hopefully we can continue this in 2 years in person when we host another exhibition of Hisaaki, who I apologize to. But that's what happens when you're the next generation in waiting. No one asks you questions. So I'm very sorry about that, because I would love to hear what you have to say as well. And maybe we can convene again sooner than later. Thank you all so much for being with us. Rose, you're on.
ここが、釉薬置き場兼釉薬調合場です。うちのミラク窯では、410数年の歴史がございますけれども、400年間、同じ釉薬の調合の仕方で調合し続けています。原料も、全て天然のものを使っていまして、主に3つの釉薬の原料からなります。1つ目がわら灰、2つ目が、木灰、3つ目が、長石。この3つの原料を用いて調合いたします。で木灰も、自分たちで調達してきて、わら灰も、農家さんに頼んで、燃やして調達してきます。でその木灰だったり、わら灰っていうのはやっぱり取れる土壌によって成分が変わってきます。なので毎年毎年同じ田んぼからできた、藁を調達しますけれども、やっぱりその土地の土壌によって成分が変わって、で同じように調合しますけれども、いい色が出たり悪い色が出たり変わってきます。
So Rose, am I still on?
Yep.
So let me just say that all of you who are in or near Boston are invited to come to the gallery with social distancing and hold one of those tea bowls, and to realize the connection between the hand of the maker, the spirit of the maker, and you. It is a true gift of their family and their tradition that has enabled us to be part of something that is well beyond us. And that is a connection to the humanity of the maker. In Benoit's case, I must say that on the occasions that we have heard musicians playing the bows that he has created, it's clear that his goal of celebrating beauty is part and parcel of what he enables the artists, the performers to do. And I would just add and end with a quote from Brother Thomas, which is, the consciousness of the beautiful will save the world. And we all hope so. Mugi?
今、前の質問から戻るんですけど、まずベノアさんからミラクさんがおっしゃったことに対して、この、世代間のその結びつきというのは非常に不思議で、そして素晴らしいものであって、感服しましたというコメントが来ました。で、あとですね、ビデオのビデオに関して、このウェビナーに関してなんですけど、久明様がお話になる機会がなかったのですけれども、若者は次の機会にということで、先代の、お父様の方を尊重させていただきたいということで、また久明様も含めていつか近いうちにもう一度機会を設けたいということですね。そして今の、ビデオに関してなんですけれども、やはり今ギャラリーの方は皆様いらしていただくことができるので、これを手に取って触ることによって、この本当の美しさ、そして伝統とその革新の重みというものが手に取ることによってもっとより分かる。そしてベノアさんの場合はあれなんですけれども、やはり共通して言えることは、その美というものを追求する。そして美を、賛美するということがやはり、最終的に目標となるのではないか。で、またトーマス修道士の言葉なんですけれども、美への意識が、世界を救うであろうという、引用がございまして、これをもって今回のウェビナーを終わらせていただきたいということでございます。
Thank you and good night or good
Thank you.
morning.
And just one thing, I just would like to say that how honored I am to share this moment with you, with such great artists, and with you, Bernie, who knows how to connect people like that. So thank you very, very much.
皆さんのようなこういう芸術家の作家の方たちと一緒にこの場にお借りて、一緒にウェビナーができたことは非常に光栄なことであり、パッカーさんのようにその人々を結びつける才能のある方と一緒にいるのは非常に嬉しいことであるということです。The 17th of this family who is going to be a potter.
Thank you everyone and good night.
ではありがとうございました。おやすみなさいじゃなくておはようございますですね。
Sayonara and good night.
さよなら。
Thank you much.